Hello, I'm Susan Regan, host of Connecticut Valley Views. And my guests are Matthew Guarnieri, president of the Italian American Defense League, Rafael Ortiz, and he is a highly sought after expert on Christopher Columbus. And he authored 4 books on Columbus, 3 in English and 1 in Spanish. And my third guest is Dario Gagliano, and he is a member of the Italian American Alliance. Our subject today is focused on Connecticut communities that are concerned with the destruction and defacing and removal of Christopher Columbus statues, specifically in New Haven and New London. Additionally, in Madison, Connecticut, the Columbus Day recognition is being removed from the Daniel Hand High School calendar. This would be replaced by an Indigenous Peoples Day. There has been an attempt to mitigate the status by having both names included in the calendar. Today's interview participants will be able to provide us with the status of these challenges and give us some historical commentary. So I would like to now turn to Matthew. And Matthew, how long have you been president of IADL? And how did you become involved in the organization?
I've been president of the IADL for 2 years, and the organization started 2 years ago when so many of the Columbus statues were being removed across Connecticut. So one statue that was removed was in New London, the other one was in New Haven, and there's been other battles for statues across the state. Some have had a positive outcome where all groups were honored and recognized and considered, but in places like New London, there was little input that was received from Italian Americans in the community. So what I realized at that point is one person couldn't take this on their own. And I know in Connecticut, there are many different Italian American organizations, but they mostly operate in their own bubble. So my goal was to seek out members of Italian American organizations throughout the state and bring them together so we can take on this challenge that many Italian Americans feel. We feel a sense of loss that our ancestors, our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents, that they are not being recognized for their struggles, for their successes, and for their contributions as Italian Americans.
Sure. Well, with IADF, can you give us some current happenings and priority goals that you've been doing? I mean, you've stated your objectives, but if there are any particular events that have been going on?
Yeah, so the Italian American Defense League, we have 3 parts to our mission. One is to promote education. There's a rich Italian American history in this country. And you could go back to the great arrival of the 1880s to the 1920s, to our contributions during World War II to save the world. And that included Italian Americans at that time fighting for the United States, and also Italians that were working behind the scenes in Italy, supporting the United States that weren't immigrants yet. And, we're, in the media, we're mostly known for pizza, pasta, pastries, and provolone. But those are 4 great things, but we're much more than that. We're engineers, we're artists, we're musicians, we're educators, we're attorneys, and we have accomplishments that have been made throughout history, and that's how we need to be recognized. So that's the promote education part of our mission, to get the information out. And, for positive portrayals of Italian, we're tired of being portrayed as gangsters or people who are ignorant in the media. Yeah, when we want to see more positive on portrayals, and when there aren't positive portrayals, we want to be heard, just like other groups in Connecticut. And lastly, we want to preserve traditions. Our tradition of celebrating Columbus Day goes back to 1892, when Benjamin Harrison apologized for a lynching that happened in New Orleans. And every major moment in our Italian-American history, in some way, it has been tied to Columbus Day. And that can't be forgotten. I can't forget the thousands who stood proud to be Americans next to Columbus statues. There are some who want to forget that, but we do not.
Well, what strikes me is that this has become, to some extent, and you can correct me if you think I'm wrong, a political issue. Would you say that? Does the media make it into a political issue? Do you feel that that's part of where the challenge is?
You know, unfortunately, the attack on Columbus has come from the diversity, equity, and inclusion movement. And the Italian American Defense League is for diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're for lifting everybody up, but we're not for picking winners and losers, picking one group at an expense of another. So I could give an example. In Madison, I've spoken with the Board of Education, and they took Columbus Day off of the calendar. Right now, it just lists school holiday. So my solution to the Madison Board of Education is we want to recognize the achievements of Indigenous people. So let's have Columbus Day stay on the calendar on the second Monday in October, and let's recognize Indigenous Peoples Day on the Friday after Thanksgiving. And there's actually more historical precedent for placing Indigenous Peoples Day on the Friday after Thanksgiving than taking away from Americans and Italian Americans on Columbus Day.
And how's that been received? I mean, has that been acceptable? Have you been able to mitigate that situation?
It depends. So there are these discussions being made across the state. Some boards, some town councils are more receptive than others. I have to say the Madison Board of Education, they have been good listeners. I'm optimistic that maybe there could be a positive outcome of recognizing all people. In other places, that's not the case. In New London, with the Columbus statue there, the mayor and the town council, they won't even talk to the Italian American groups about what is to come of that statue that was removed in New London. In Stonington, I presented an argument to the Board of Education there, and the chair, he just got angry and started yelling at me. So it all depends on who's listening. There are some people that are just on the far left. They've been indoctrinated, and no fact is going to convince them. There was one meeting we attended, a community conversation in Hartford about what to do with everything Columbus and Hartford. We had anthropologist Carol Delaney there. We had an expert attorney Robert Patrone there. I believe Rafael and Dario were at that meeting too. And we were told, your facts don't matter. It's our truth that matters. So there are some people who believe that Columbus represents everything, all the sins of America. And it's just based on generalizations and lies. And my response to them is, you may believe that, but that's your perception. That's not based on fact. But they're not looking at fact. They're just looking at how they're feeling.
All right, one other question for you before we moved on to Dario. Do you know where these statues have gone when they remove them? Do they tell you where they actually exist?
So right now, as far as we know, the New London statue is in storage at an undisclosed location. The Worcester Square Monument is in storage in an undisclosed location. the American Italian Women of Greater New Haven, they've filed a lawsuit, and they continue to look into that lawsuit to return the statue to Worcester Square. And there have been some successes. In Norwalk, one was moved to private property behind a church. In Stamford, Unico there was able to keep the statue in its place. And in New Britain, the statue still stands, and Dario is close to that situation there. And I'm sure he could tell you more about the situation in New Britain.
And I'm just going to ask you one other question. How many members do you currently have in your town?
So in my group, how many members are in the IADL?
Yes.
All right. So we have 100 active members in the IADL, and we're also collaborating with the IAA that has 7,000 members, and also I'm a member of the Italian IAOVC, the Italian American One Voice Coalition, which has about 35, 40 organizations that are a part of it. So we're really bringing people together, and sure, my organization is trying to fill a void right here in Connecticut.
All right. Well, thank you for that. Now, Dario, I want to ask you, please give us a sense and give us some examples of Italian history and culture.
Well, you have to go back 3,000 years. I think to kind of piggyback on a little bit of what Matt said, there's so much in terms of engineering and, culture and architecture that we've done. To just give one example, in America alone, if you go to the Capitol, you can see a fresco called the Apotheosis of Washington, and it shows Washington ascending into heaven, basically. That was done by an Italian named Constantino Brumidi, right here in the United States. Filippo Mazzei was a close personal philosopher friend of Thomas Jefferson, and he's been the one attributed to the notion of that, the quote of all men are created equal by their creator in our Declaration of Independence. More recently, I can think of the million plus Italians who, were in the war effort in World War II. That's not even including all the countless, contributions that we've done on a world level. Something as mundane as the invention of jeans, something that was created by Italians. Our contribution to literature, Dante Alighieri's Divine Comedy. And I think this is something that Italian Americans are lost to, because many of them have imbibed that negative stereotype of all we are is pizza and pasta and Godfather. And they really need to imbibe the elevated aspects of our culture. And that's something that Matt and I are diligently working on as well.
Yes. Now, I did speak to Matthew about the size of his member. What about the size of the Italian American Alliance in Connecticut overall?
In Connecticut, we have more or less about 430 members subscribed. And then the amount of presence depends on what kind of battle we're doing. Our most notable contribution was really in our hometown of New Britain, where we also were aligned with the local General Amelio Society, which is right next to the statue, and we worked together on the Columbus statue there.
Now we've talked about the destruction and I guess painting, spray painting, and so forth, and removal. What do you see the most damaging, or where the most damage has been done? Is it in the removal, or is it in the destruction of the statue? And if there has been destruction of the statues, was there a plan to be able to have them resurrected or recreated, let's say?
Well, I'd say in Connecticut, we're relatively fortunate in the sense that there's been vandalism in terms of spray painting, but for the most part, cities have been fairly effective in taking care of that. In New Britain, for example, I do have to say the mayor stepped up the police presence, cleaned up the spray painting. in other cities that this similar thing has happened. I'd say, though, really the worst aspect is just the neglect that some towns have had across the country in general in terms of caring about whether it's damaged or not. Because even if they don't agree with the concept of Columbus, they should understand that most of these statues, specifically these statues, were monuments raised by the local community to celebrate their heritage. And it was not a political ideological assertion of colonialism or any of this nonsense that's being put out today.
All right. Well, the obvious question is, has anything been done about the people who vandalized? Have they been caught? Has anything happened to them? Have they been charged with anything? Did the police arrest them? Is it a gang? Is it one person? Generally speaking, what could you tell us about that?
Well, the most famous example nationwide is the one that happened in Minneapolis, where there was a large vandalism of the statue there. And there, the people responsible have been arrested and tried and fined for what they've done. I think this is a good step forward because there's at least a recognition that Columbus and his monuments deserves at least something a little bit more than the disrespect that they've been receiving. I think the momentum in general is beginning to push in our direction on that. And I think as the Italian community slowly awakens from its long slumber, I think we're going to see more prosecution of people who try these things.
Yes. Well, what are your goals for the future? Obviously, we are covering this subject here on this program today, but what would you see as the goals for the future specifically?
Well, in the immediate future, we're looking to consolidate on our gains. So in New Britain specifically, we've already successfully gotten approval to put a dedication to Italian American war veterans there. We are attempting to repurpose the statue as a veterans monument as best as we can, because that was really the purpose of our monument in New Britain, specifically to kind of build a link between the Italian Americans during World War II and the rest of the country. We have joined with Matt and the IADL in certain events in Brantford and in Guilford to oppose the actions of the city council there. And we also are planning an event in September 25th at the Italian American Club in New Britain as an Italian feast. Very tied to the old traditional Italian feast at St. Anne's Parish there, to build a sense of community, because I think the one thing that Italian Americans have lost and that we definitely need to work on more than anything is to rebuild this lost sense of community.
Do we look at these events or these venues, are they fundraisers as well to either create more statues or replace other statues that have been damaged?
Well, the Italian feast is mostly to build a sense of community, and sometimes the funds can be used for the other purpose. Festa Italiana in New Britain is also part of a separate organization, so they do different things with their funds. We're not necessarily privy to everything that we do. We have raised funds specifically to build upon the statue in New Britain in terms of the dedication that we did. But depending on what the purpose is, we'll build a fundraiser for it.
Very good. Well, Rafael, I'm turning to you now. You're the well-acknowledged authority on Christopher Columbus, and you know about the historical origins and encompassing the current concerns. Please outline some of your views that are expressed in your books.
Thank you for having me. I am not Italian American, so I'm not. My motivations are not they are not about Italian American heritage. When I start to research about Christopher Columbus and what they claim today, I noticed that these people, they are anti-American. So it's not about Christopher Columbus. Christopher Columbus is just the scapegoat. I have a feeling that they would start with Columbus and then they would move to other things. And that's what happened in 2017 when the whole Christopher Columbus thing became national news. They start to destroying the statues of Christopher Columbus, and then they move to others, and then they start to blaming him for the Civil War and the Confederates. Then they start to attack George Washington and the American anthem and many other things. I also discovered that these people are the same people who want to rename Thanksgiving Day as on Thanksgiving Day. That's when I knew that it was not about Christopher Columbus. And I say that in my books, and I have 3 of them. I have 1 in Spanish. I'm about to publish my 4th, and I'm writing my 5th right now. But there is no need to rename Columbus Day, for example, as Indigenous Peoples Day, because there are 2 Indigenous Peoples Day on the month already. I mean, on the calendar. I think one is on August or September, and it's called International Indigenous Peoples Day. And then there is Native American Heritage Day, which is celebrated on the Friday after Thanksgiving. And also November is Indigenous Peoples Month. So there is no need to rename anything. And also, besides, Columbus was not this monster that they claim. He was not evil. He was not a rapist. He was not a racist. He was not a genocidal maniac. He was not a pedophile. All those allegations are fictional, and they are not from any source. They are actually from revisionists, mostly Howard Zinn and other people who had followed, and they are anti-American, they are Marxist, and they want to remake America to something else.
Well, essentially then what you're saying is that there are other factors that are playing into this. And just very quickly, our time is going by fast, regarding the unfavorable perception of Italian Americans, what do you see as priorities that could change that? Do we need to get rid of those movies? How do you see the public viewing Italian Americans in a better light?
You mean the movies like
well, do you feel that has had a factor that has played into this, despite the fact that it's glamorous and interesting and people like to watch them? Do you feel that these movies, that you have an issue with them? Are they creating part of the problem, or do you see the media as doing that?
Well, I was living in Puerto Rico. I am from Puerto Rico, and I knew that even back then, I knew that every movie they have like a gangster, an Italian American gangster. So, and I watched, well, not recently, but a few months ago, I saw this comedian attacking Christopher Columbus, and he was doing this Italian accent and trying to portray like a gangster. And it's almost like they're trying to portray Christopher Columbus like the first gangster who was caught in the hands of native or people or mistreating people.
Yes.
So, yeah, I guess there is something to it.
I very much appreciate your input on that. Matthew, what do you see as the best way to contact if people are interested in finding out more? What would be the website that they would go to find out more about this subject?
Yes, the IADL's website is iadlnow.org, iadlnow.org, and we have
an email address.
And
is there an email address too?
iadlnow@yahoo.com, iadlnow@yahoo.com. We have a donate button there. We have connection to the closest sources to Columbus if you want to know what happened for yourself and not just trust the opinion of a Marxist or someone or a communist who hates America. You could read the primary sources that we have links to. And also we have to start thinking about who are the politicians who want to rewrite history and who want an anti-American narrative. And we have to start saying, you know what? Some people don't want to get involved because they don't really see anything monetary about this. It's not hitting my pocketbook. But if there's a candidate who supports this revisionist history, think about how it will affect all policy across the board. And we need to make a stand and support politicians who are pro-Columbus and pro a more unifying diversity, equity, and inclusion ideal rather than just trying to put some groups down to elevate others.
Well, you know, you made some very good points there, Matthew. I'm glad you wrapped up with it there, because this not only affects the Italian Americans, but anyone who is trying to have their traditions and heritage acknowledged and respected. I think those are very good points. And the politics is certainly part of it. It plays a great deal of it. I want to thank each of you gentlemen for your time, Matthew and Rafael and Dario, to cover this subject. And I want to remind all of our viewers that you can see all of our programs on ctvalleyviews.com. And please, you know, also you can write to me at ctvalleyviews@cox.net. I hope our viewers have enjoyed today's program. We thank you, gentlemen, again for your time. And hopefully we may follow up on this and see where you are a few months down the road.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Great. Great. Thank you, gentlemen.